Well, we are really excited today for our Wonderful Works Talks. We're going to be learning about supportive resources, how they work and why. And we are excited to welcome Jen Owens, who is a Board Certified Behavior Analyst with Bridgeway Academy. Welcome, Jen.
Thanks, Barb. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm Jen. I'm a behavior analyst at Bridgeway Academy, which is a local education and therapy center in Columbus, Ohio. I'm also a mom of 2 young boys and a churchgoer. So attending church is very important for our family, and providing opportunities for all families is something that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we are too. We're excited to have you. Can you tell us a little bit before we get started about the students that you work with at your school?
Sure. So the majority of students at Bridgeway Academy are on the autism spectrum. We also service students with other developmental disabilities, and they range from age 3 to age 21.
In your experience, Jen, how important are supportive resources to helping children and be successful?
Yeah, I believe that supportive resources can be helpful tools for all people, but especially for students with developmental disabilities. They provide clear expectations and structure, and having those clear expectations and structure really builds success in a church setting or a home setting or a school setting, really anywhere that the student is.
Yeah. But today we're going to talk about 3 types of supportive resources: visuals, sensory items, and then tools to communicate expectations. We're going to go ahead and start with visuals. So Jen, can you explain to us a little bit why visuals are helpful for students who have developmental disabilities?
Sure. We all use visuals. So thinking to-do lists, calendars, menus, signs that provide directions like exiting or stopping are all visuals. They're tools that can help individuals with developmental disabilities, especially, to be more successful because sometimes the world is really confusing.
I find that a lot.
Yeah, for us too.
Yeah.
When we don't know where to go in a store, you know, you look for the exit sign. Or if you have to go to the bathroom, you're looking for where the bathroom is. So it gives routine and provides clear expectations. Research actually shows that visuals help learners complete more tasks independently, learn more rapidly, decrease frustration and anxiety, and adjust more readily to changes in the environment.
That's great. Can you give us some examples of some visuals that we could use with students in our church classrooms?
Sure. First, we'll talk about timers. So timers and warnings help students prepare for transitions especially, or let them know how much longer they'll be engaged in a certain activity. They can help create structure and routine so there aren't any surprises, and helps a student feel more in control of their time and their body. This is a visual timer, a time timer specifically, and can be used in the classroom at church. So when students arrive, it's playtime, and you know that the first structured activity is going to be sitting on the carpet reading a Bible story. You can show the student during the playtime that in 5 minutes, it's going to be time to clean up the toys and go to the carpet to listen to a Bible story. This visual timer is really nice too because the red gets smaller as the passage of time goes. And it lets the students see that time is moving. And then when it gets to 0, it beeps. So it's another good indicator that time is up, and really helps students transition well and know what to expect.
Yeah. So I will say we use visual timers in our church ministry every week for every student. And it is one of the most powerful tools that we have. Because transitions, as you mentioned, with moving from one activity to the next, and not feeling ready to do that without warning is typically tough for everyone, right. but especially for some kiddos. So this tool, I definitely think everyone should check out. It's been a total game changer for us.
Yeah, and this one specifically is called Time Timer, and they have apps for it as well, and they come in different sizes. So this is a nice size for a classroom. It can be set up on a shelf, like near the play area, and can be moved.
We use both the apps and the big one. So for our whole class transitions, we use the big timer you just showed. But then each of our buddies has the Children's Countdown app on their phone, which we will provide a link in our resources, so that you can do it on the go, and the kids love it. So,
yeah, that's great.
Can you talk a little bit about visual boundaries and explain what does that mean?
Sure. Visual boundaries can make use of a particular space more obvious. So a real life example would be a parking space in a large parking lot. The parking space lets you know where your car goes. In the classroom, furniture can be arranged in a way to indicate what should happen where. So where is kind of the key word. Tables can be set up to indicate that that's where coloring and crafts happen. A rug next to an organized play shelf can indicate that that's where play happens. Rug dots can be set up around the Bible so that students know that when it's Bible story time, that's where they go. Here is an example of a rug dot, variety of different colors, and let students know where they should go. So instead of saying, it's time for Bible story, go find a seat, that can be kind of confusing. It doesn't give specific information. You can say, it's time for Bible story, go sit on the orange dot. And the child can find where the dot is and know what you're expecting them to do.
And one more quick tip is if you have to do something a little bit different, so let's say it's a Christmas program and you've invited all the students up to the big church to sing. We actually carry our little rug dots with us for our students in our ministry and put them where we want them to stand and direct them to that spot. And we have found that has been helpful in helping them understand a little bit new directions.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think even getting a roll of painter's tape, something
painter's tape's great.
Where you can throw painter's tape in a small backpack or fanny pack, and it's discreet, so it's not visible, like you said, to the audience, but it is visible to the student to let them know where they should go. So it really helps create a more inclusive environment too, and giving students the support so that they can be included and participate.
Let's talk a little bit about visual schedules.
Sure. So visual schedules outline a routine ahead of time. A real life example of this is seeing a meeting agenda before the meeting starts. You know how long you're going to be in that meeting when you get out. Visual schedules in the classroom help students know what to expect and when. So when is kind of that key word there. They provide an order of events and indicate passage of time. They're also helpful in letting students know when they'll see their parents again, because that can be hard. Parents drop off, and then what? How long is it going to be until parents come back? And these visual schedules can be really helpful. So here's a visual schedule for a middle school night. This can be prepared ahead of time. A simple ask to the church leader or Sunday school teacher, quick email conversation to say, hey, can you just let me know what the plan is for Wednesday night church or Sunday morning? And then once this is made, can be shared with the students when they arrive. So letting the child know, this is what's happening in this order. This is what's happening before it's time to go. Depending on the learner, you can use pictures and words. You can use just words. It can be something where after the activity is done, it's crossed out. So the student knows, okay, 3 things are done. Now I have 4 more until it's time to go.
So before we move into sensory supports, Jen, do you know why visuals are so important for certain students? It's my understanding, like a lot of people who are on the autism spectrum actually learn very well visually. Do we know why that is?
And all that I found is the research that points to the benefits of visuals. So completing more tasks independently, learning more rapidly, adjusting to changes in the environment, and decreasing frustration and anxiety.
Does that kind of go with like the multi-sensory learning? It's adding another sense.
Yeah, and if you can add hands-on, interactive, absolutely. Providing multiple ways for students to learn.
All right, so let's talk about sensory stuff.
Sure. So not all students learn the same way, and not all students have the same sensory needs. So sensory support really, I think, is assessing how a student is responding to or interacting with the environment. If the music is turned on, it's quiet, you're sitting in the seat, and then the video starts playing with the music and your child starts covering their ears, it's too loud. So thinking of those senses, hearing, tasting, touch, all tactile, all of those senses are maybe experienced more for students with developmental disabilities or autism. So because everyone has different sensory needs and they may change throughout the day or from week to week or as people get older, it's really important to assess students individually. So really being intentional about observing how the student is responding to the environment or how that environment is playing a part. And it might be something like where anxiety and frustration happens right away and it's overwhelming and kind of stops them in their tracks where they can't do anything else. So they might not be able to communicate either to say, it's too loud, turn it down. It's about how the student is changing their body and responding to the environment can help know what supports to put in place. So thinking of the music, if it is too loud and you notice a child covering their ears, that's a clear indicator, that maybe headphones could help reduce the sound level. If maybe it's more subtle and they're not covering their ears, but they're trying to leave the room, thinking through, are they leaving because it is too loud? So really observing, kind of playing detective and seeing what clues the student is giving to be able to provide those supports.
We have also found when our children try to leave, it's almost always because the environment has become loud or overwhelming.
Sure.
What can volunteers do besides give the headphones to help? Like because you can't always make all the kids be quiet. I wish we could. That would be nice. So what can they do?
Offering the student who's having a hard time to adjusting to the noise, to sit further away, to even take a small break. If a small break out of the room can be helpful to readjust and kind of regulate before coming back in, that is okay. Always thinking about the student and their needs and how we can care for them and support them is first and foremost. Do they have to sit and sing and listen to that song for the next 5 minutes? No.
Right.
And taking a step out and then thinking through how can we help them sit and think or give them the tools to participate in a way that they're able to.
In your opinion, how important is having a designated quiet area for success in inclusion?
It's absolutely important. So that calm space or the quiet area provides a safe space for students. And I think it's really important to find a permanent area. So having a corner of the room that's designated to it or a separate room completely that is stocked full of sensory tools and supports like headphones or rocking chairs or bean bags or tents, fidgets that kids can touch with their hands and play around with, like these that just kind of keep their hands busy. So I think it's critically important to have a designated area for that.
Can you tell us more about fidgets?
Sure. So fidgets, for kids who maybe have their hands all over, it gives something for them to hold on to. It can meet their needs in the big rooms or during the lesson. So it doesn't have to take them away from the group activity. They can still play with the fidgets while they're learning and participating.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about adaptive seating?
This is called a wiggle seat. So it inflates. You can see it has air in it. There's different textures. So provides a different type of seat for a student. This can serve as a visual boundary to let students know where to sit, and then also provide them the opportunity to move their body and kind of wiggle, but still stay in the activity or lesson and give them the opportunity to learn and participate.
Before we move on, is there anything else that you think is important for people to understand about sensory in kids, and maybe even a little bit about stimming?
Yeah. So stimming is self-stimulatory behavior and can be seen in a variety of ways. So every student might stim differently, and it is a way for the student to move their body in a way that makes them feel good. It provides positive feedback in some way. It's sensory stimulation. It feels good for them to maybe move their hands back and forth or run back and forth continuously. As long as it's not interfering, it's part of who they are and how they are wonderfully made and how they enjoy life. Looking at how often that they're doing it, letting them have those opportunities, so maybe building that into a visual schedule. If a child likes to move their body a lot, first on the schedule it might be song time, and then a break to run around in the back, and then sit at the table for craft, and then time to run in the back. But really, I see stimming as a part of who the student is, and to allow them to be who they are.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the rules of thumb when we're talking about inclusion, is determine, is a behavior causing an issue, or is it just different? Because if it's just different, then it's okay. Leave them be. And I think that is really important for acceptance.
Yeah, and if it is causing a disruption, like I said, looking at ways to build it in, because it's important to that child. They're showing you that it's valuable to who they are, and looking at ways that you can still provide it, like on a schedule or by them requesting to take a break.
Yeah, and just before we move on, this is another reason why I do think it's important if you're able to have a designated space for a break room, because if a student does need to run back and forth, if you are able to go into a designated space where they can do that without causing a disruption, it's just better for everyone, including the student. So this is another reason why I think sometimes as ministry leaders, we have to kind of pick and choose what we really need to advocate for our ministry. And I tell you, getting a designated quiet space or break room is one that is worth fighting for, because it makes such a huge difference to your church and to families and to really just our mission as Christians wanting to be inclusive altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about tools for communicating expectations. Why is understanding what to expect so critical for behavior?
Yeah, it is. It's one of the simplest yet most important elements that can be put in place for effective, basically, classroom management, and it's setting clear expectations.
Yeah.
Expected behaviors are not always obvious, and we cannot assume that a child already knows how to behave or what we're expecting them to do. We have to clearly define it. Being specific is really important. So refraining from using vague language such as "it's time to go." We'll go where do I line up? It's not clear. Or finding a seat, it doesn't give enough information. So being clear and specific to say, it's time to go, line up on the dots. It's time to go, find a blue chair at the table.
Okay, so Jen, why is it so important to communicate expectations?
I think it's important, especially for students who have autism or developmental disabilities, because language can be confusing. We can't assume that what we're saying is heard the same way that we are expecting it to be heard. So students with autism or developmental disabilities can't necessarily read between the lines to put those extra pieces together. So it's really important to be clear so they know what you're saying, because your words have meaning. So being simple, being clear, giving exactly what you want them to do. Students with autism and developmental disabilities can be very literal in their thinking. So it's really important to be literal in how we're giving the information. Otherwise, it's cloudy, it's confusing. It might cause feelings of stress or anxiety or frustration, and the student might not know how to communicate that except for melting down, or running away or having a hard time. And it's something, truthfully, that can be changed on our end as volunteers and teachers and leaders. If we're clear, then we're setting the child up for success. If we are not clear and thinking that they know what we mean, then possibly setting a student up for failure and having a hard time. So there's power in how we're saying things. Being as simple and clear cut as possible is a good way to go.
Yeah, real quick before we go into the supports, I do have a story on this, kind of give an example. So I know someone that has who has some autistic tendencies, and we were making cake. And so he looked at the back of the instructions and it said, put in your oil. And he did. Put in your eggs. He did. Put in your water. He did. And then he's like, okay, I'm ready. It did not say on the back of the box to put in the cake mix.
Yeah.
So he didn't. And so that was like a real reminder to me that you can't take for granted that someone is going to understand what you mean, or they're going to infer, they're going to get the inference. That you really have to be clear, especially in these situations, so that they can be set up for success. How would you feel if you really don't understand what someone's saying? You're going to feel really stressed and frustrated and embarrassed, maybe, because people are looking at you like, why don't you get it? Or you just feel lost. So, yeah.
And a lot of our students, sorry to cut you off, a lot of our students with developmental disabilities or autism have those feelings, but might not know how to communicate to ask those questions. What do you mean? Right. So instead of being able to say, what do you mean by doing this? They just feel the feelings and are overwhelmed. And what we see then are tantrums or meltdowns and having a hard time. So that the language is really important, and also recognizing that communication isn't going to necessarily be clarified by the student.
Yes. Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about tools we can use to help be clear?
Sure. First Then boards are simple 2-part visual schedules. So earlier we looked at a visual schedule. I think it had 7 steps. First Then just has 2, and it builds on motivation as well. So thinking of the first as an instruction or an activity that might be a little bit more difficult or harder to do, then adding in the break or something fun afterwards. So being able to use this, present it visually and say, first we're going to do circle time and read our Bibles, then you'll get to do the trampoline. So they know when they do this, this is coming. This might be more fun and enjoyable. And it's a simple way to say, meet this expectation, and then this is what's coming next.
Yeah. And a great tip on this is another opportunity you have to give controlled choices to your students. First, we're going to do the circle, and then we may ask the student, then next, would you like to do the trampoline or play with your doll? And that really gets them excited and engaged and motivated to do what we want them to do, because they're actually going to be doing a preferred activity that they chose and they enjoy.
Absolutely. And really, what does it matter in the long run? Like, this is the important part. It's all important, but this is what we want in the church setting, kids to have the opportunity to participate in a Bible lesson, to hear the stories from the Bible, to know that Jesus loves them as it's applied through these Bible stories, and to be able to sing songs or to make a craft. These are what we want to see the kids doing and participating. What really is the big deal to add in this extra motivator to get to this? That's
right. And just another tip on this is we also use that visual timer here. So we want them to be, staying in the Bible lesson for as long as possible, but maybe we only want them to play on the trampoline for 10 minutes. So that's, again, we're going to use that visual timer to help them know how long they have and what to expect for the next transition.
Yeah. And thinking too, the visual timer could be used for the Bible lesson to start as well. If Bible lessons are really hard, it's hard for a student to sit, give them that wiggle seat, let them know what supports are available for them. If the Bible lesson is 15 minutes, that might be really long. 5 minutes of Bible lesson, you can do the trampoline for 5 minutes and then come back for that last 5 minutes, taking away all of the ideas of the exact plan that is set for all of the students and really seeing how students individually can be supported and meeting them where they're at currently. And it's okay to start small. This is a social story. Social stories are fun and meaningful ways to describe an event or a situation, or maybe a change to a situation. They're often written from the student's point of view and include pictures, positive language, simple language, clear information. So this story is called Going Back to Church. And I think this is especially helpful during these COVID pandemic times because there have been changes. Yes. So being able to create a story, like a book, for a student to know what going back to church looks like. This shows the calming space or the sensory room, and it has words. So we're going back. Getting a temperature taken was a new thing for students. It wasn't what they used to do. So being able to have a book form that lets students know what they can experience ahead of time is really, really helpful in setting them up for success.
So in our ministry, we only make social stories when there is a big change. And we actually ask parents, we send it to parents before they come to church and ask parents to practice it at home. And then we have the exact same social story at our ministry, and we have one of our volunteers, as soon as the child gets there, first thing, read that social story again. And I think those are the type of things that we can add in that are simple, that make such a huge difference with anxiety and behavior.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of sending it home because it lets the parents know and it gives them information so they can read the story every night, build it into bedtime routine, or read it Sunday morning as a family before you get out the door. They can take that information and add it however they want to during the school week leading up to church as well. And
I think it also really goes a long way to help parents feel supported And because the truth of the matter is, in disability ministry, there will be times you're going to have hard conversations. And so relationship building is really important, and doing everything that you can to make people feel supported. It is really just, it's a difference maker, I think. So. Yeah. The next tool we're going to talk about for communicating expectations is the Just For Me book. And I'm going to go ahead and take this one because this is actually a tool to communicate expectations more for your volunteers than for your students, although you can use it for both. So these are books you make for each of your students out of really small photo albums that you could buy at Walmart. And what you want to do is inside you want to put the information about each of your students that you want your volunteers to remember. It would be impossible for all your volunteers, especially if you have a new volunteer, to remember every important thing about a child that they need to know. So this kind of lays out what their likes are, what their dislikes are, things that are helpful, things that may be a trigger. And it's handy. You can put it in your buddy bag and have it with you at all times. And another thing you can do with Just For Me books is also have some of these things that do support the student. So in there, we also have our visual schedule. So anywhere you are, your volunteer can come out and remind the student of what comes next. And another thing that we do put in ours towards the back is some of the positive behavior support strategies that we teach. As volunteer teams, we do our best to train and remember, but when you really get in a situation, sometimes your mind goes blank. So we put a couple of these, we call them cheat sheets in the back that just help further equip your volunteers really quickly in the moment. So it is a fantastic tool. We highly recommend that you make them for all of your children who may be in your disability ministry, and your volunteers will say, thank you.
Here's an example of the buddy bag that Barb was just talking about that can hold the All About Me book, can have fidgets in it, social story can fit inside, and it's a nice size that you can wear it and take it with you if you do go from room to room or when leaving the classroom to go to the calming space. So it's always with you, and the student always has those supports available.
Why is this so important that we really strive to become more inclusive as churches? What difference does this really make for students and families, in your opinion?
I think it makes a huge difference. I think just giving the opportunity for the parents to know that their child is learning about Jesus in a supported environment, that they as parents can also be in the big church learning about Jesus is huge. And thinking inclusively as well, all students have the right and should have the opportunity to learn and participate. And it might just look a little bit differently. So being able to identify what those needs are for the students and provide the supports so that they can learn, because it's possible. And thinking ahead of time and preparing and putting these in place can just be life-changing and make such a difference in each family's life.
Yeah, I think you said it well. It really is life-changing. The small changes that you make, because learning how to use supportive resources, honestly, is not very hard. It's pretty simple. You just got to take your time and do it. But it is life-changing for students and for families, and it's really eternity-changing for these people. So we just are glad that you're here. Thank you, Jen, so much for joining us and explaining this. For all you out there that are watching this, we will have some resource links in this unit in our Facebook group. So log in, and we're here to help you. But thanks so much.